Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to talk to you about one of the more commonly used sci-fi materials, which is actually a real material, or at least based on a real material, but is also simultaneously incredibly dumb to use in nearly any story. I'm talking about Neutronium. This meme is what got me thinking about this in the first place. I'm sure everyone recognizes the Death Star here, but for anyone who's unfamiliar with the other half of this meme, that's the Doomsday machine from the original series of Star Trek, an indestructible, planet-destroying robot that was only stopped by the desperate sacrifice of flying an entire Constellation-class ship. It's the same class as the original Enterprise from the show. They had to fly that down the Doomsday weapon's throat, and the resulting explosion from the ship's antimatter stockpile managed to shut the Doomsday device down, though through all of this, the outer shell was completely unaffected. In the show, it's explained that the reason the Enterprise weapons were ineffective against the Doomsday weapon was because its hull was made of Neutronium, which has shown up a few times throughout Star Trek as one of the very few materials that are just totally impervious to phasers. Oddly enough, it being that durable makes perfect sense. Star Trek being realistic, who'd have guessed? Here's the thing, Neutronium is what neutron stars are made of. And next to black holes, neutron stars are basically the densest thing in the known universe. Basically, if you take the matter in a fairly large star and condense it down into a ball that's about as far across as a city, that's a neutron star. Really, you consider a neutron star to just be a single neutron the size of a city. No space between nucleus and electrons, nothing. Just solid, nigh impossibly dense neutron. People who are smarter than me have made comparisons like saying that a teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh as much as a mountain. This has a few implications. For one, yeah, it would be pretty much indestructible. I suppose you could use antimatter to turn it directly into energy, but even with that, it would take a lot of antimatter since it and matter annihilate each other at a 1-to-1 ratio. The other major implication would be the fact that you're talking about a material so dense that even a relatively small volume of it would have a noticeable gravitational pull. So let's go back to the Doomsday machine, and I'm going to get super technical on you here, so sorry for that. Some fans did what they do best and did some calculations to figure out how big the Doomsday machine was, and thus how much it would weigh based on it being made of Neutronium and it being hollow and that kind of thing. They figured that it was 2,772 meters long and up to 607 meters in diameter, and of course it tapers, all that. And of course it's partially hollow, at least. They also figure that with those dimensions and materials, it would have a mass of about 427 sextillion metric tons. For context, Earth has a mass of approximately 5.9 sextillion metric tons. Here's the fun part though. Because the force of gravity works as a function of the mass of the two interacting objects and the distance between them, the force on a 100 kilogram object on Earth at 1 g, or 10 meters per second squared, is 1,000 newtons. That's what a moderately heavy person experiences. Take the significantly larger mass of the Doomsday machine and reduce the distance between the same person standing on its surface from the radius of Earth down to just 300 meters, though, and you get a gravitational force of 316 trillion newtons, or about 316 billion Gs. Yeah, the Doomsday device has a higher gravitational pull at its surface than the Sun, which has a force of about 27 G at its surface, or 274 meters per second squared, or 274,000 newtons of gravitational force. Yeah, no kidding, Doomsday Machine. That thing would cause planetary orbits to get screwed up if it just flew by. Granted, this is in no small part because you could theoretically get up pretty close to the thing without ramming it, gravity being highly influenced by distance, but the point remains that this is all because Neutronium is absurdly dense, which means that uses of it in science fiction are just plain silly, at least most of the time. Even the Doomsday Machine, sure, it would absolutely do the job, but whoever attempted to build the thing would get crushed and or torn apart by just getting anywhere near the thing. Heck, if we take the whole thing at face value, it would mean that the Constellation-class ships were capable of withstanding the same 316 trillion Newton force pulling in every direction from the center at the same time, since the one in the show, flew down the throat of the Doomsday Machine in order to take it out. So that means that gravity is working in all directions outward trying to tear it apart, and it survived that. I would guess that would mean that Star Trek ships are nigh indestructible to all but the most absurd destructive weaponry, and I'll have to go back and revise my conclusions from my Star Trek and Star Wars matchup video series based on that. No, I'm not doing that. I also remember this old episode of classic Doctor Who, where the Doctor and his companions were stuck in this sort of blank space between space, where the only other thing there was this ship with a big old hole in it. One of the Doctor's companions picks up a piece of the debris about the size of a Rubik's Cube and comments that it's made of dwarf star alloy before handing it to another companion who falls over due to the unexpected weight. Yeah, that would be a Neutronium alloy, and yeah, pretty silly in context. Let me just, carry around a chunk that probably weighs as much as about Australia or something. So, for any of you astute observers out there, anytime there's like a superhero with his Neutronium weapon or armor or whatever, yeah, that's not what it is. If it was, no material on Earth would be able to support its weight. I don't care if Superman can carry it. If he stands on the ground while carrying some, he'll sink into the ground. If he lands on a building, he'll crash through the roof and ceilings until he has the presence of mind to start flying again. It is absurdly heavy. But what does this mean for the Death Star versus Doomsday Machine matchup? Well, for one, yeah, I don't think that even the mighty super laser would even make a dent. Though if it managed to shoot directly down the weapon's throat, it still might disable it just like in the show. As for the reversal, the Doomsday Machine and its anti-proton beam would probably be able to shred the Death Star just like any of the other planets that it was designed to cut up and consume. But beyond that, if it just flew close enough to the Death Star, it would begin pulling chunks off it like a black hole consuming a planet or a star, tearing it apart without the need to fire a shot. But what do you all think? What's your favorite absurd sci-fi material? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.